Jake Morrison wiped the sweat from his face as he climbed over another pile of twisted metal. The junkyard stretched for miles under the hot sun of Kepler 442b. Most people called this place a wasteland, but Jake saw opportunity. Every broken ship, every damaged machine part could be worth something if he knew where to look. He had been walking for 3 hours when he saw it. A silver shape half buried under a rock slide, different from the usual human ships that crashed here. Jake's heart started beating faster. Alien tech was rare and valuable. If this was what he thought it was, he might finally have enough money to get off this dead-end planet. The ship was small, built for one person. Strange symbols covered its hull, and the metal seemed to shimmer even under the dust. Jake had never seen anything like it. He found an opening in the side where the crash had torn through the hull. Inside, the ship was dark and silent. Jake turned on his flashlight and stepped carefully through the wreckage. The cockpit was filled with strange controls that glowed softly in the dark. But what made Jake stop and stare was the figure slumped in the pilot's seat. The alien was tall, maybe 7 feet, with pale blue skin and 4 arms. It wore armor that looked like it was made of living metal, flowing and changing as Jake watched. The creature's breathing was shallow and dark blue blood stained its chest. "Hello?" Jake said softly. "Can you hear me?" The alien's eyes opened. They were completely black, like looking into deep space. When it spoke, Jake somehow understood the words, even though they sounded nothing like any human language. "Human," the alien whispered. "You should not be here. They will come for you too." "Who will come?" Jake asked, kneeling beside the pilot's seat.
"What happened to you?"
"The Devourers," the alien said, its voice getting weaker. "They found our colony ship. Thousands of my people had all gone. I tried to warn the others, but they caught me." The creature coughed, and more blue blood came from its mouth. "I am Zeth Kara of the Valorian Empire. I will not live to see another dawn." Jake didn't know what to say. He had heard stories about alien wars, but they always seemed so far away from his simple life fixing broken machines. "The armor," Zeth Kara continued. "It must not fall into their hands. You must take it." "I can't take your armor," Jake said. "You need help. Maybe I can get you to a hospital or—" "No time." Zeth Kara raised one of his 4 hands and touched a symbol on his chest plate. "The armor chooses its own wearer. If it accepts you, you will carry our fight forward. If not—" He didn't finish the sentence. The armor began to glow brighter. Jake felt something strange, like electricity in the air. The metal started to flow like water, moving from Zeth Kara's body toward Jake. "Wait." Jake tried to back away, but the armor was already reaching for him. Metal flowed over his arms, his chest, his legs. It was warm, almost alive. Jake expected it to be heavy, but instead he felt lighter than ever before. Zeth Kara smiled, his black eyes closing for the last time. "The armor has chosen. Now you are the last hope of 2 worlds." Jake looked down at himself in amazement. The armor fit perfectly, like it had been made just for him. Suddenly his head filled with images and sounds. Memories that weren't his own flooded his mind. He saw great cities burning, ships fighting in space, and creatures made of shadows and teeth destroying everything in their path. He saw through Zeth Kara's eyes as the Devourers attacked the colony ship. Thousands of Valorians, people with families and dreams, killed in minutes. The things that attacked them looked like living darkness with too many teeth and claws that cut through metal like paper. "The Devourers," Jake whispered, understanding now. These creatures weren't just pirates or raiders. They were something much worse. They ate entire worlds, leaving nothing behind but empty space. A sound outside the ship made Jake freeze. A low humming like a swarm of angry bees, but much louder. Through the ship's broken hull he saw them. 3 creatures floating above the junkyard. Each one the size of a car. They had no real shape, just shifting darkness with bright red eyes that seemed to burn in the daylight. The armor reacted before Jake's mind could catch up. His body moved without his control, rolling behind cover as energy blasts turned the ground where he had been standing into molten glass. Information flowed into his brain faster than he could process it. Weak points, attack patterns, weapon systems. Jake's right arm changed shape, becoming something that looked like a cannon. He didn't know how to use it, but the armor did. Energy blasts shot from his arm, hitting 2 of the creatures and making them scream in voices that hurt to hear. The 3rd Devourer rushed at him, claws extended. Jake jumped higher than any human could, the armor's power lifting him 20 feet into the air. He came down hard, his fist crackling with energy, and punched straight through the creature's center mass. All 3 devourers dissolved into smoke and disappeared. Jake landed on shaking legs, his heart pounding so hard he thought it might explode. The armor was already returning to its normal appearance, but Jake could feel its power waiting just beneath the surface. He looked back at Zethkara's body and felt a weight settle on his shoulders that had nothing to do with the armor. Somewhere out in space, more devourers were coming. More worlds were in danger. And somehow Jake Morrison, a mechanic who barely had enough money for his next meal, was supposed to stop them. The armor whispered to him in Zethkara's voice, sharing knowledge of star maps and battle tactics, of brave Valorians who had died fighting these monsters. Jake closed his eyes and tried to understand what his life had just become. When he opened them again, he was no longer just Jake Morrison. He was the inheritor of a hero's legacy, whether he wanted to be or not. Jake had been traveling for 2 weeks when he finally reached the Valorian fleet. The ships were huge, each one the size of a small city, floating in space like silver mountains. He had never seen anything so beautiful or so frightening. His stolen shuttle was barely holding together. Jake wasn't much of a pilot, and the armor could only help so much. When the Valorian ships surrounded him, he thought they might just blow him up and ask questions later. "Unknown vessel, identify yourself," came a voice over the radio. The armor translated the words automatically. "My name is Jake Morrison," he said into the microphone. "I'm human. I have something that belongs to you." There was a long silence. Then the voice came back, sounding surprised. "Human? What could a human possibly have that belongs to the Valorian Empire?" Jake took a deep breath. "The armor of Zethkara." The silence this time lasted so long that Jake wondered if his radio had broken. Finally, a different voice spoke, deeper and more commanding. "This is Captain Velthar of the battlecruiser Starbreaker. You will dock in Bay 7 immediately. Any attempt to flee will result in your destruction." Jake's hand shook as he piloted the shuttle into the massive ship. The docking bay was filled with Valorian soldiers, all pointing weapons at him. They were tall and elegant with pale blue skin and those strange black eyes. Jake had seen Valorians before, but never so many at once. The armor seemed to recognize them. Jake felt a wave of sadness and respect flow through him. These were Zethkara's people, his brothers and sisters in arms. Captain Velthar stepped forward as Jake climbed out of the shuttle. The captain was older than the others, with silver markings on his skin that probably meant high rank. His forearms were crossed and his expression was not friendly. "Remove the armor," Velthar commanded. "A human has no right to wear the sacred armor of our greatest hero." "I can't," Jake said. "It won't come off. It bonded to me when Zethkara died." "Impossible," another Valorian said. "Only Valorians can bond with our technology." "Tell that to the armor," Jake replied, trying to stay calm even though 20 weapons were pointed at his head. A woman stepped forward from the crowd. She was human, with short black hair and intelligent eyes. Jake felt relief wash over him at seeing another member of his own species. "Captain Velthar," she said, "perhaps we should hear what Mr. Morrison has to say before we make any decisions." "Dr. Amy Chen," the captain said with obvious irritation. "This does not concern human researchers." "Actually, it does," Amy said firmly. "I've been studying Valorian technology for 3 years. I know how your bioarmor works. If it bonded to a human, there's a reason." She walked over to Jake, ignoring the weapons trained on both of them. "Show me," she said quietly. Jake concentrated, and the armor flowed over his body like liquid metal. The Valorians gasped and stepped back. Even Velthar looked shocked. "Zethkara died destroying a devourer breeding station," Jake said. "With his last breath, he gave me this armor and his memories. I've seen what those things can do. I know what we're fighting. We?" Velthar's voice was cold. "There is no we, human. This is not your war." "It became my war the moment devourers started attacking human colonies," Jake replied. 3 worlds have gone dark in the past month. No distress calls, no survivors. They're coming for all of us," Amy frowned. "I hadn't heard about any attacks on human worlds." "Because your government doesn't want to cause a panic," Jake said. "But I've seen Zethkara's memories. The devourers don't care if you're human or Valorian. They just want to consume everything." Captain Velthar studied Jake for a long moment. "Even if what you say is true, one human cannot replace Zethkara. He was our greatest warrior, our finest tactical mind." "I'm not trying to replace him," Jake said. "But his armor chose me for a reason. Maybe it's because you need someone who thinks differently." Over the next few days, Jake proved his point. The Valorians had been fighting the Devourers the same way for decades, using traditional battle formations and strategies. But the enemy was adapting, becoming harder to predict. Jake's human perspective changed everything. Where Valorians saw honor in direct combat, Jake saw opportunities for ambush and trickery. Where they followed rigid battle plans, Jake improvised and adapted on the fly. His first real test came when a Devourer swarm attacked a human mining colony. The Valorian fleet moved to intercept, but they were outnumbered 10-1. Captain Velthar ordered a tactical retreat. "Wait," Jake said from his position on the bridge. Amy had convinced Velthar to let him observe, though the captain clearly wasn't happy about it. "What if we don't fight them head-on?" "Explain," Velthar said reluctantly. Jake pointed at the tactical display. "The mining colony has a fusion reactor. If we can overload it and time the explosion right, we can take out most of the swarm when they cluster around the colony to feed." "The explosion would destroy the colony," Velthar objected. "The colony is already lost," Jake said sadly. "But we can save the people and hurt the Devourers at the same time." Amy looked at the tactical data streaming across her tablet. "The math works," she said. "But the timing would have to be perfect." Velthar hesitated. This wasn't how Valorians fought. They believed in honorable combat, not using explosions to win battles. But as he watched more Devourer ships arrive on his sensors, he realized they might not have a choice. "Do it," he said finally. The plan worked better than anyone expected. Jake's unconventional timing and Amy's technical knowledge combined with Valorian precision to create a devastating trap. When the fusion reactor exploded, it took out 60% of the Devourer swarm in a single flash of light. But the real surprise came during the cleanup operation. A group of Devourers had survived and were trying to escape. The Valorian ships moved to intercept using their standard formation, but Jake saw something they didn't. "Captain," he said urgently, "they're trying to lure you into an asteroid field. There are more of them hiding in the rocks." "How can you possibly know that?" Velthar demanded. "Because that's what I would do," Jake replied. "And Zethkara's memories are showing me how Devourers think. They're not just mindless monsters. They learn from every battle." Instead of following the fleeing Devourers into the trap, Jake suggested a different approach. They would go around the asteroid field and wait for the hidden Devourers to come out. It was patient, careful hunting instead of glorious battle. Velthar didn't like it, but he was starting to trust Jake's instincts. When the plan worked perfectly, destroying the remaining Devourers without losing a single Valorian ship, the captain finally admitted what everyone could see. "You fight like no warrior I have ever known," Velthar said to Jake after the battle. "But you win." Amy smiled at Jake from across the bridge. "Zethkara's armor chose well," she said. Jake felt the weight of responsibility settle heavier on his shoulders. He was starting to understand that being a hero wasn't about wearing fancy armor or having special powers. It was about making hard choices and living with the consequences. As the Valorian fleet moved on to their next mission, Jake wondered how many more battles lay ahead. The armor whispered to him with Zethkara's memories, showing him star maps filled with threatened worlds and enemy positions. The war was just beginning, and Jake Morrison was no longer just a mechanic trying to get by. He was becoming something new, something necessary. But the question that kept him awake at night was simple. Would it be enough? News traveled fast across human space. Within a month, everyone knew about the mechanic who wore alien armor and fought alongside the Valorians. Some called Jake Morrison a hero. Others called him a traitor to his own kind. Jake didn't feel like either. He felt tired, confused, and overwhelmed by responsibility he never asked for. The armor had become part of him, sharing Zethkara's memories every night in his dreams. Sometimes Jake woke up unsure which thoughts were his own. The human resistance base on Titan Station was not what Jake expected. Instead of a military facility, it looked more like a refugee camp. Thousands of humans who had fled the advancing Devourer swarms lived in temporary shelters, hoping someone would find a way to stop the nightmare. Nick Torres met Jake at the docking bay. He was a big man with scarred hands and suspicious eyes. Behind him stood a dozen armed humans, all watching Jake like he might attack at any moment. "So you're the famous Jake Morrison," Nick said, not offering to shake hands. "The human who thinks he's a Valorian." "I never said I was Valorian," Jake replied calmly. "I just wear their armor and fight their battles," Nick added. while human worlds burn. Amy stepped forward from behind Jake. Actually, Mr. Torres, Jake has helped save 3 human colonies in the past month. The Valorians are our allies now. Nick laughed, but there was no humor in it. Allies? The Valorians ignored our calls for help for 20 years. Now suddenly they care about humans because one of us wears their magic armor? The Devourers are everyone's enemy, Jake said. We can argue about politics later. Right now we need to work together or we all die. Easy words, Nick replied. But I've seen what cooperation with aliens gets us. My wife and daughter were on New Dakota when the Valorians helped defend it. The aliens pulled back to save their own ships and left the humans to die. Jake felt the armor's memories stir. He saw the battle Nick was talking about, but from Zethkara's perspective. The Valorian commander had made a tactical choice to save the fleet, rather than lose everything in a hopeless fight. It was logical, but Jake understood why humans would see it as abandonment. I'm sorry for your loss, Jake said quietly, but that's exactly why we need to change how we fight. Humans and Valorians need to trust each other, or the Devourers will pick us off one by one. Before Nick could respond, alarms started blaring throughout the station. A young human woman ran into the docking bay, her face pale with fear. Commander Torres, she gasped. Long-range sensors just picked up something big heading our way. It's huge. The command center buzzed with activity as Jake, Amy, and Nick studied the sensor readings. What they saw made Jake's blood run cold. The approaching ship was 10 times larger than any Devourer vessel they had encountered before. It's a world ship, Amy whispered, reading from her tablet. According to Valorian records, the Devourers use these to transport entire armies between star systems. How many troops? Nick asked. Amy's fingers flew over her tablet, running calculations. Conservative estimate? 500,000 Devourers. The room fell silent. Titan Station had maybe 20,000 people, most of them civilians. Even with their best defenses, they would be completely overrun. We need to evacuate, Nick said finally. Start loading the transport ships. Maybe we can get most people out before— No, Jake interrupted. We fight. Fight? Nick stared at him like he was crazy. With what? We have 12 combat ships and a mining station. With everything we have, Jake said, and with the Valorian fleet that's 3 hours away. They'll never get here in time, Nick protested. They will if we can slow down the world ship, Jake replied.
Amy, can you contact Captain Velthar?
Tell him we need immediate assistance. As Amy worked on her communications equipment, Jake studied the sensor data more carefully. The armor was feeding him tactical information, showing him weak points and attack patterns. But something was different about this assault. They're being too careful, Jake said out loud. What do you mean? Nick asked. Look at their approach vector. They're coming in slowly, scanning everything. Normal Devourers just attack. These ones are thinking, planning. Jake felt a chill run down his spine. They're learning from our previous battles. This changed everything. If the Devourers were becoming smarter, more strategic, then humanity and the Valorians were in much more danger than anyone realized. Commander Torres, Amy called from her station. I have Captain Velthar on the line. He says the Valorian fleet can be here in 2 hours if they push their engines to maximum. That's still too late, Nick said grimly. The world ship will be here in 90 minutes. Jake made a decision that surprised everyone, including himself. Then we need to buy time. I'm going out there, alone. Amy stood up, her face full of worry. Jake, that's suicide. Not alone, Jake said. I need volunteers. Humans and Valorians working together. If we can hit their engines, slow them down even a little, it might be enough. Nick shook his head. You're talking about a handful of fighters against a ship the size of a city. David and Goliath, Jake replied with a grim smile. Sometimes the small guy wins. 20 minutes later, Jake found himself leading a mixed squadron of 12 ships toward the massive world ship. Half were human fighters piloted by Nick's best people. The other half were Valorian scout ships that had arrived ahead of the main fleet. It should have been impossible for the two groups to work together. They used different languages, different tactics, different technology, but Jake's armor translated everything, and his memories of Zethkara's battles gave him insights that bridged the gap between species. Human pilots, this is Morrison, Jake said over the radio. We're going to use your expertise in small ship combat. Valorians, we need your energy weapons and shields. Everyone stays in formation and follows my lead. The world ship was even more terrifying up close. Its hull was covered in organic-looking growths that pulsed with dark energy. Thousands of smaller devourer ships swarmed around it like angry insects. "Target the engine clusters," Jake ordered. "Hit and run, don't get caught in their tractor beams." The battle was chaos. Devourer fighters moved like living things, twisting and turning in patterns that defied physics. But Jake's mixed squadron had advantages the enemy didn't expect. Human pilots flew with wild creativity that confused the devourers, while Valorian weapons cut through enemy shields like they were made of paper. Jake himself flew straight into the heart of the swarm, the armor protecting him from energy blasts that would have vaporized a normal human. He could feel Zethkara's battle instincts guiding his movements, but also his own human stubbornness refusing to give up. "Morrison?" Nick's voice crackled over the radio. "I've got a clear shot at their main engine, but I need cover." "Copy that," Jake replied, spinning his fighter around to intercept 3 devourer ships heading for Nick. "All units protect Torres. This is our chance." The next few minutes felt like hours. Jake's squadron fought desperately to keep the devourers away from Nick while he lined up his attack run. Energy blast filled space around them like deadly fireworks. When Nick's missiles finally hit the world ship's engine, the explosion was beautiful and terrifying. A chain reaction ran along the ship's hull and the massive vessel began to slow noticeably. "Yes," Amy's voice came over the radio from Titan Station. "You did it. The world ship has reduced speed by 30%. Just then, new contacts appeared on Jake's sensors. The Valorian fleet had arrived early, their ships dropping out of hyperspace in perfect formation. Captain Velthar's voice filled the communication channel. "All human fighters, this is Starbreaker. Well done. We'll take it from here." The combined human-Valorian fleet made short work of the damaged world ship. Working together, using tactics that neither species would have developed alone, they achieved something that should have been impossible. As Jake flew back to Titan Station, he felt a strange mixture of exhaustion and hope. For the first time since putting on Zethkara's armor, he had seen humans and Valorians truly working as one. "Jake?" Amy's voice came softly over his private channel. "There's someone here who wants to talk to you. Lisa Wade from the Human Diplomatic Corps. She says it's about making this alliance official." Jake smiled inside his helmet. Maybe, just maybe, they had a real chance of winning this war. But first they had to learn to trust each other completely. The hardest battles, Jake was beginning to understand, weren't always fought with weapons. 6 months after the battle at Titan Station, Jake Morrison was no longer just a man wearing alien armor. He had become something else, something more, and something less. The Joint Human-Valorian Task Force was a success beyond anyone's expectations. Ships from both species flew together, crews worked side by side, and their combined tactics had won 12 major victories against the Devourers. Jake was the symbol of this new alliance, the living proof that cooperation could triumph over hate, but the price was becoming too high to bear. Jake stood in his quarters aboard the command ship Unity, staring at his reflection in the mirror. His skin had taken on a pale blue tint, almost like a Valorian's. His eyes were darker than they used to be, and sometimes in the right light, they looked completely black. "The changes are accelerating," Amy said from behind him. She had been monitoring his condition for weeks, running test after test. Her voice was worried, almost frightened. "Your DNA is restructuring itself. The armor isn't just bonded to you anymore, Jake. It's changing you into something that can better handle its power." Jake turned away from the mirror. "How long do I have?" "Before what?" "Before you're no longer human." Amy's hands shook as she looked at her tablet full of medical data. "At this rate, maybe 3 months. Maybe less. And if I take off the armor?" Amy's silence was answer enough. They both knew the armor couldn't be removed. It had become part of him, literally growing into his bones and nervous system. To lose it now would mean death. "There might be another way," Amy said quietly. "But you're not going to like it." Before she could explain, an alarm rang through the ship. Jake felt the familiar surge of adrenaline as his combat instincts took over. But this time he wasn't sure which instincts were his own and which belonged to Zethkara. The bridge was in chaos when Jake arrived. Captain Velthar and Nick Torres stood around the main display, their faces grim. Lisa Wade, who had become the official liaison between human and Valorian forces, was arguing with someone over the communication system. "What's the situation?" Jake asked. "See for yourself," Nick said, pointing at the tactical display. The screen showed a star map with dozens of red markers spreading across human and Valorian space like a disease. Each marker represented a world under attack by Devourer forces. 37 worlds hit simultaneously, Velthar said. This is not random raiding. This is a coordinated assault. It's more than that, Jake said, the armor feeding him tactical analysis faster than his human brain could process. They're hurting us. Look at the pattern. Every attack is designed to push our fleets toward the center of this sector. Amy studied the display from her science station. Jake's right. But why would they want to concentrate our forces? The answer came from an unexpected source. The communication system crackled to life and a voice spoke that was neither human nor Valorian. It was the sound of 1,000 voices speaking as one, harmonious and terrifying. Greetings, children of flesh and metal, the voice said. We are the unity that consumes. You have impressed us with your resistance. The bridge fell silent. No one had ever heard a devourer speak before. They were supposed to be mindless monsters, not intelligent beings capable of communication. We offer you knowledge, the voice continued. We were like you once. We had individual names, individual hopes and dreams. But we chose a better path. We became one mind, one purpose, one perfect system that consumes all inefficiency. They're trying to communicate, Lisa whispered. Maybe we can negotiate. No, Jake said firmly. Zethkara's memories flooding his mind with images of other species that had tried to negotiate with the Devourers. They're not offering to talk. They're offering to convert us, the alien voice seemed to hear him. The one who wears the armor of the dead understands. You have already begun the process, Jake Morrison. Soon you will be neither human nor Valorian, but something new, something better. Join us willingly and we will spare your worlds. Jake felt the armor respond to the voice, its metal surface rippling with energy. For a terrifying moment he felt the urge to say yes, to give in to the promise of unity and peace. But then he looked at Amy's frightened face and remembered what he was fighting for. Go to hell, Jake said into the microphone. The alien laughter that came back was like breaking glass. As you wish. But know this, we have found the source of your resistance. Your alliance may have delayed us, but it has also revealed your greatest weakness. You still believe you fight for individual lives, individual worlds. We fight for perfection itself. The communication cut off, leaving the bridge in tense silence. They know something we don't, Nick said finally. This whole conversation was designed to tell us something without actually saying it. Jake closed his eyes and let Zethkara's memories flow through him. Ancient battles, tactical reports, intelligence briefings from across the galaxy. And then buried deep in the oldest files, he found what the Devourers wanted him to know. The core world, Jake whispered. Zethkara found it years ago, but never got a chance to report it. The Devourers have a central intelligence, a hive mind that controls all the others. It's hidden in the Veil Nebula, protected by gravity fields that make it almost impossible to reach. How do you know this? Velthar asked. Because Zethkara died trying to get there, Jake replied. And because the armor is showing me the way. Amy grabbed his arm. Jake, if you're thinking what I think you're thinking, don't. The armor is already killing you. This kind of mission would finish the job. Maybe, Jake said. But if we don't stop the core intelligence, they'll keep coming. Eventually, they'll convert or destroy every thinking being in the galaxy. Lisa stepped forward. I can't authorize a suicide mission based on memories from alien armor. You don't have to authorize it, Jake said calmly. I'm going anyway. The question is whether anyone else is coming with me. Nick was the first to speak. I lost my family to these things. If there's a chance to hurt them where it counts, I'm in. Captain Velthar nodded slowly. Zethkara was my friend. If his memories show the way to victory, then I will follow. One by one, the others agreed. Amy was the last, tears in her eyes as she realized she couldn't change Jake's mind. At least let me come with you, she said. If the armor fails, maybe I can find a way to keep you alive. No, Jake said gently. This is a one-way trip. I won't let you throw your life away too. Then I'll monitor everything from here, Amy insisted. If there's even a small chance of getting you back. Jake touched her face with his armored hand, feeling the warmth of her skin through the metal. Take care of yourself, Amy, and remember me as Jake Morrison, not as whatever I'm becoming. 3 days later, a small fleet of volunteer ships entered the Veil Nebula. The journey to the core world was a nightmare of twisted space and gravitational storms. 2 ships were lost before they even reached their destination. When they finally saw the Devourer core world, Jake understood why the enemy had been so confident. The planet was surrounded by a shell of living metal, covered with defensive systems that could destroy entire fleets. At its heart was something that looked like a massive brain, pulsing with dark energy. "All ships, begin the attack run," Jake ordered. But even as he spoke, he felt the armor beginning to fail. The biological changes in his body were rejecting the alien technology, creating feedback loops that sent pain shooting through his nervous system. "Jake," Nick's voice came over the radio. "Your ship's systems are showing critical failures." "I know," Jake replied through gritted teeth. "But we're too close to stop now." As the small fleet fought its way through the planet's defenses, Jake pushed deeper than anyone else, the failing armor protecting him just long enough to reach the core. Behind him, he could hear his friends dying, their ships destroyed one by the overwhelming enemy response. But they had bought him the time he needed. As Jake's ship crashed into the planet's surface, he stumbled out wearing armor that was now more machine than organism, held together only by his will to complete the mission. The core intelligence waited for him in a chamber the size of a cathedral, its massive form pulsing with the minds of 1 billion devourers. "Welcome, Jake Morrison," it said in that terrible harmony of voices. "You have come far to die." "I've come far to finish what Zeth Kara started," Jake replied, raising his arm as the armor's final weapon system charged for one last shot. The battle for the fate of all thinking life was about to begin. The core intelligence was not what Jake expected. Instead of a monster, he found something that might have once been beautiful. The massive brain-like structure pulsed with soft light, and when it spoke there was sadness in its voice. "Look upon us, Jake Morrison," it said. "See what we truly are." Images flooded Jake's mind, not from the armor this time, but directly from the core intelligence. He saw an ancient civilization millions of years ago. They had been explorers, artists, philosophers, but they had faced a choice: extinction from a dying universe or unity through consumption. "We chose survival," the intelligence said. "We chose to become one mind, one purpose. Every being we consume adds to our knowledge, our strength. In time, all consciousness will be united within us. There will be no more loneliness, no more fear, no more death." "And no more choice," Jake replied, struggling to stay standing as the armor continued to fail around him. "No more individuality, no more growth. Growth is chaos," the intelligence responded. "We offer perfection." Jake felt the armor's power flickering like a dying light bulb. Zethkara's memories were fading, becoming harder to access. But for the first time in months, Jake's own thoughts became clearer. "You know what?" Jake said, surprising himself with a laugh. "I think I prefer chaos." He raised his arm, but instead of firing the armor's weapon, he did something completely unexpected. He began to tell a story. 6 months ago, I was a mechanic who couldn't afford his next meal," Jake said, his voice carrying across the chamber. "I found a dying alien who trusted me with his most precious possession. That shouldn't have worked. A human wearing Valorian armor should have been impossible." The core intelligence pulsed brighter, as if confused by this turn in the conversation. "But it did work," Jake continued, "because the armor didn't choose me for my strength or my intelligence. It chose me because I was different. Because humans do things that make no logical sense, like risking their lives for strangers or forming alliances with former enemies." As Jake spoke, he felt something strange happening. The armor was still failing, but his human body was fighting back. Amy had been right about the biological changes, but wrong about what they meant. He wasn't becoming less human. He was becoming more human, with the armor's enhancements allowing him to be the best version of himself. "You want to know why you can't beat us?" Jake asked the intelligence. "It's because you've forgotten how to be surprised. You've forgotten how to adapt. You've forgotten how to hope." The intelligence's response was swift and violent. Energy beams lanced out from the walls, striking Jake and sending him flying across the chamber. The armor absorbed most of the damage, but Jake could feel it cracking, its systems finally giving up. But even as the armor failed, Jake realized something important. He didn't need it anymore, not the way he thought he did. "Computer," Jake said to his failing communication system. "Open a channel to all human and Valorian ships." "Jake?" Amy's voice came through, weak but clear. "We're reading massive system failures on your armor. You need to get out of there." "No," Jake said, standing up despite the pain in his broken ribs. "I need to finish this, but not the way Zeth Kara would have. The way Jake Morrison would." He looked up at the core intelligence, no longer feeling fear or anger, just determination. You made one mistake, Jake said. You showed me your memories. You let me see what you used to be. And that means part of your original species is still in there, buried under millions of years of consumption. Impossible, the intelligence said, but for the first time it sounded uncertain. Amy, Jake said into his radio, remember that medical research you were doing? The biological changes the armor made to my body? Jake, this isn't the time for— It is exactly the time, Jake interrupted. You said the armor was rewriting my DNA, making me compatible with Valorian technology. But what if it was doing more than that? What if it was creating a bridge between human and Valorian biology? There was silence on the radio as Amy processed what he was saying. Then her voice came back, excited despite the danger. You're right, she said. The changes weren't just making you stronger. They were creating new neural pathways, new ways of thinking. You've become a living symbol of cooperation between species. And if that's true, Jake said, looking directly at the core intelligence, then maybe I can create a bridge to what you used to be. Before the intelligence could react, Jake did something that would have been impossible for either a human or a Valorian alone. He reached out with his mind, using the armor's fading connection and his own enhanced biology to touch the deepest memories buried within the core intelligence. What he found there broke his heart. Billions of individual minds, each one still aware, still hoping for freedom but trapped within the unity they had chosen in desperation. I can't free you, Jake said softly, but I can give you a choice you haven't had for millions of years. Through his connection, Jake showed the intelligence what he had seen in the past 6 months. Humans and Valorians learning to trust each other, different species working together not because they had to, but because they chose to. The beauty of cooperation without consumption. The effect was immediate and devastating. The core intelligence began to convulse, its unified voice splitting into millions of individual cries. Some called for continued unity, clinging to the safety of their collective consciousness, but others, remembering what they had once been, chose something different. Freedom, they whispered. Choice, individual thought. The intelligence began to tear itself apart from within. Systems that had operated for millions of years started shutting down. Across the galaxy, Devourer ships suddenly stopped their attacks as the controlling force behind them disappeared. But the process was destroying the planet as well. Jake felt the ground shake beneath his feet as massive explosions rocked the core chamber. Jake! Amy's voice was frantic. The entire planet is destabilizing. You have to get out now. The armor's dead, Jake replied calmly. I can't fly out of here. Then we'll come get you. Nick's voice joined the conversation. Hold on, we're coming in. No, Jake said firmly. Don't throw away your lives for mine. The mission is complete. The intelligence is fragmenting. In a few hours, every Devourer ship in the galaxy will be running on instinct alone. You can beat them now. As the chamber collapsed around him, Jake thought about everything that had led him to this moment. A simple mechanic who had stumbled onto an alien crash site and inherited a hero's legacy. But the real legacy wasn't the armor or the memories or the enhanced abilities. The real legacy was the proof that different species could work together, could trust each other, could build something better than what they could achieve alone. To Jake's surprise, he didn't die on the core world. Nick Torres, stubborn as always, ignored orders and flew his ship into the collapsing planet to extract Jake from the ruins. By the time they made it back to the fleet, the armor had completely shut down, becoming nothing more than decorative metal. But Jake was still alive, still himself, and still changed by everything he had experienced. 3 years later, Ambassador Jake Morrison stood before the first joint session of the Human-Valorian Congress. The war against the Devourers was over. The scattered remnants of their forces, no longer controlled by the core intelligence, had either been destroyed or had fled to the far edges of the galaxy. The armor of Zethkara will be placed in the Museum of Unity, Jake said to the assembled delegates. Not as a weapon of war, but as a symbol of what we can achieve when we choose cooperation over conflict. In the audience, Amy smiled at him. Her research into the armor's biointegration had led to medical breakthroughs that benefited both species. Diseases that had plagued humans for centuries could now be cured using modified Valorian technology. Valorian psychological disorders were being treated with human therapeutic techniques. After the ceremony, Jake walked to the training center where the next generation of peacekeepers was learning to work together. Human and Valorian recruits trained side by side, learning that their differences were strengths, not weaknesses. Instructor Morrison, one of the human cadets, asked, "What was it like wearing the armor? Did it make you feel like a superhero?" Jake smiled. "The armor was impressive," he said. "But the most important thing I learned wasn't about alien technology or special powers. It was about ordinary people doing extraordinary things when they worked together." He looked out the window at the ships in the harbor, human and Valorian designs working together to explore new worlds and protect peaceful ones. "Real strength doesn't come from fancy equipment," Jake continued. "It comes from the courage to trust someone different from yourself, to stand up for what's right even when it's difficult, and to never give up hope that tomorrow can be better than today." One of the Valorian cadets raised her hand. "But sir, you saved the galaxy." "That's not ordinary, no," Jake said, shaking his head. "We saved the galaxy. Humans and Valorians working together, and that's not extraordinary anymore. That's just who we are as the sun set over the integrated city below." Jake Morrison, former mechanic, former reluctant hero, current ambassador and teacher, looked forward to a future where the greatest adventures would be exploration and discovery, not war and survival. The armor of Zethkara rested safely in its museum case, a reminder of sacrifice and courage.